Welcome to the Table Podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we give you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to The Table, the podcast where student life professionals, educators, and changemakers come together to share stories, insights, and ideas for building communities where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Bridget Johnson. Today, I am honored to welcome Dr. Denise Pope, Senior Lecturer at the Stanford University Graduate School of Education. I'm going to slow down. And co-founder of Challenge Success, a nonprofit organization committed to improving the well-being and engagement of students across the country. Denise is the author of Doing School: How We Are Creating a Generation of Stressed Out, Materialistic, and Miseducated Students. Yep. A book that has sparked national conversation about what we're really teaching kids when we put achievement above everything else. She is also the co-author of Overloaded and Unprepared, and a 3-time recipient of Stanford's Outstanding Teacher and Mentor Award. Today, we're talking about student well-being, what schools and families get wrong and what they get right, and how we can work together to raise kids who are genuinely healthy, engaged, and prepared for life. Welcome to the table, Denise. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Bridget.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm honored. You are doing such great work, and we're so excited to have this conversation with you. So let's jump right in, shall we?
Yeah.
All right. So you spent decades studying student stress and well-being as a teacher, as a researcher at Stanford, and now through Challenge Success. What was the moment you realized this wasn't just an academic issue, but a crisis that needed a different kind of response?
That's a great question. So, when I was doing my initial research, I was shadowing 5 students at a local high school. That was actually my dissertation.
Oh,
And I
nice.
waited till they all graduated and published a book. And the kids helped me write the book. So each kid helped me write his or her own chapter. And that's the Doing School book. And I got a call after we published that book. So this is, maybe 3 years after I did the research, from the head of the health center at Stanford University. And he said, "This is a crisis. You've rung a bell. You've struck a chord. We see the aftermath of kids from your book at our school and at colleges all over. And there are mental health issues. There are ulcers. There is cheating. They are falling apart and breaking. And we need to start some kind of intervention." And I said, "I don't have the answers to that." And he said, "Well, you're not going to do it alone. Let's get a bunch of people here together." And that's what ended up being my lab at Stanford. And since then, we spun out into a nonprofit, Challenge Success. But that's when I knew, this is a bigger problem than just a couple of kids in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does doing school really mean?
Doing school is what the students coined, the behavior of going through the motions, turning in your homework, doing your work for the most part, but not enjoying it, not finding it interesting, not finding it meaningful or compelling. You're just like a little robot doing school, going through the motions. But, and just think about that. You're spitting back answers. You're taking a test. It's not seeping in. You're not excited.
Yeah.
You're not super jazzed. You're just doing school.
Got it. And so do you think that pattern's changed since you first wrote the book, or has it intensified?
Well, we're in a pretty unique position that we have longitudinal data from over 15 years where we've looked at student engagement patterns. We've looked at health and belonging patterns too. But in the engagement pattern, it stayed pretty consistently. About half of our sample is doing school. We have a sample of 350,000 middle and high school students, and half of them are just doing school. They're telling us, like, I don't even have time to stop and think. I've got to just get on to the next thing, do it, turn it in, move on.
That's incredible. Half of the kids are doing school.
Yeah.
Oh man. So, I heard about you first through Challenge Success. And so that was kind of how we got connected. And it was really interesting to hear the type of work that you all were doing with regards to students. And so I know you guys survey thousands of students. We just talked about that. But
Yeah.
what are the most consistent and maybe most surprising findings about how students are actually doing outside of the doing school thing?
So, well, doing school was pretty
Pretty big.
eye-opening, pretty big.
Yeah.
We've got about 10% of the sample that's disengaged completely. So they're
Mm,
not doing it, they're not interested in it, and they don't see the meaning of it. But the
yeah.
the biggest surprise for me is that we work with all sizes of schools, all types of schools, public, private, charter,
Mm-hmm.
international. And there are schools that have really wonderful reputations of very caring teachers and adults, and our belonging scores might be really low still at those schools. So students don't feel like there's an adult they can go to if they have a problem. Some students don't feel like they can really be their true authentic selves. Some
Mm-hmm.
people feel like some students feel like they're being bullied. So what surprised me was sort of the level of belonging issues that we're seeing across the board at schools that you would think, of course, there's going to be an adult there. I mean, all these adults care for you and love
Right.
you, and they didn't go into teaching for the money, but
Exactly.
the students are not feeling the love.
Ugh. And so that's, when students feel like they belong, it just opens up so many different doors and so many different, ways that students can be successful and kind of get to the next level. And I think sometimes we forget about that piece, that we think that it's, having, the academic achievement is what's going to kind of propel students forward. But if they're not engaged and connected to begin with, it's hard for them to do anything else because,
Well, it's not only hard, it's actually impossible in your
mm,
brain. So what we know neurologically is that our cognitive and our social and our emotional um, neurology is all interconnected. So if you feel like you don't belong, you're actually spending a lot of time thinking about, wait, what am I doing?
yeah,
I
that,
don't feel safe. My
mhm.
alert is up. You literally cannot learn. You cannot take in the cognitive because the rest of your brain is so focused on that piece. So
On that
when we
piece.
work with schools, we talk about engagement and belonging and well-being, right? If you're
Mhm.
exhausted, you can't process it either.
Right.
They're so interconnected. We need to focus on them.
Yeah, and so that's it's huge, and I hope that schools are now taking or spending a little bit more time thinking about that in their classrooms and not just kind of focused, on the scores. And so one of the other big themes in your work is the problem of overscheduling and extracurricular overload. What does that look like in practice, and what has that cost kids? Because I've just seen it continue to ramp up and ramp up and ramp up.
Totally. I'm sure your listeners have too. A lot of them are really the first face in terms of these extracurriculars, both at school and outside of school. So in our data, at the middle school level and at the high school level, students are really overscheduled, and they're
Hmm.
overscheduled both in school and out of school. And look, extracurricular activities are really good. I am not against extracurricular activities. You get your body in motion, you learn new things, you have a non-evaluative adult that you're forming a relationship with, right? A coach or a drama
Yes,
teacher, right? These
absolutely.
are amazing things. We want to have these going on at schools.
Yeah.
But we have kids in our study who are doing 35 hours a week of extracurricular
It's a full-time
activities. It's a
job.
full-time job. That is on top of homework. That's on top of
Oh
going to
my
school. They're
gosh.
in the Key Club. They're in the Spanish Club. They're on the soccer team. They take piano lessons. They do Model UN. They do robotics. They're waking up early to do, swim team, and they're
All
staying
the things.
all
Yeah.
the things. There are kids at schools till 10, 11 o'clock at night, sometimes 1 o'clock in the morning if you're talking about
Ugh.
robotics or tech week for the dance show.
Right. Yeah.
35 hours a week. So how much is too much? We want to
Hmm.
encourage outside activities, but how much is too much? And a lot of times the schools will say, well, we can't control that because they're on our baseball team, but they're also playing year-round baseball. We can't control what's going on at home. That's where the parent education becomes so key. But there are
Yes.
things that schools can't control, right? So I'm going to give you a super quick example.
Yes,
If
please.
this is
Absolutely.
helpful
Yeah,
for
that's
you.
great. Yeah.
Okay. We have some schools that rotate when their arts shows happen
Hmm.
so that if you let's say the art show always happens in the spring, the big musical theater production. If you are a spring athlete, you're trying to do both at the
Right.
same time. If you rotate it, they have a rule that if you are playing a sport during the season that the big show is happening, whether that's the dance show or whatever it is,
Uh-huh.
you have to wait. You have to wait till the next year when it's rotated. And kids get
Ah.
mad about that, right? But it is so that you're not trying to play your sport and fit in your theater rehearsal and all that. And then you get home and you've got all that homework and you're not sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah, they've infused a healthy balance there. And so, yeah, of course kids are going to roll their eyes, but then you have actually provided, and that's what we should be doing in schools and as adults, is providing these structures and not kind of giving them kind of the plethora of things that they can do. Just do all the things as much as you can handle, because that's not the way.
Exactly.
But
And
so how,
also watching when some of these things are scheduled, by the way,
yes,
right?
no,
So
absolutely.
tech week, or right before the robotics tournament, kids are at school till like 1 a.m. They're not getting enough sleep. So we've changed things at schools where instead of tech week, where it's all after school, you do a
Yep.
tech weekend, a really intense tech weekend. But
Oh,
kids are getting
interesting.
their sleep,
Yeah.
right? And then they're coming and ready to do the play. I'm just throwing out some examples of that might
No,
be
I love
useful.
that. No, that's great. So, Denise, how do you help those parents though? Because you've got parents who are like, no, 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 we've got to get your resume together because schools want to see you doing all these things and you can't, you've got to specialize and you've got
Yeah.
to be perfect. And like, I got to tell my friends on the cocktail circuit where you're going to school. So, you got to do this for me. How do you
Yes,
tell
yes.
parents? How do you engage those parents and what are you saying to them?
So, what we say to schools these days is you're not just educators of students, you have to be educators of parents and guardians. And that
Yes.
is because this is exactly what parents are thinking. They're fearful for the future. They believe that in order to get into XYZ college, which they believe is the key to life,
Right.
and future success and happiness, and they think if my kid doesn't get into XYZ college, they will be still living at home in my basement or flipping burgers somewhere. And so we help schools educate parents about the basic developmental needs of kids, the importance of sleep, the connection between sleep and mental health, the fact that when you're so overscheduled, you're more likely to get hurt in your
Yeah.
sport. You
Yep.
are, and then you're going to not be able to play at all. And then you're not going
Mm-hmm.
to get that D1
Yeah, because
scholarship to
you're not
whatever
out there. You
college.
can't make tape, and no one
Right.
can see you, and
Exactly.
blah blah
And
blah.
and this idea of kids have to be angular and specialized is really an outdated idea. Schools are looking, colleges and universities are looking for kids who have, at Stanford, it's called intellectual vitality. What are you really excited about? What are you really engaged in? So they don't necessarily want to see you doing 20 different things. They want to see what you got excited about. But what you got excited about doesn't mean you have to do it to the nth degree.
Right.
Right? They just want to see that you're, and also on the Common App is have you held down a job? A lot of these kids in privileged communities haven't had a job at all. And
Right.
they're just doing all their extracurriculars at a time where you should be scooping ice cream, So we really help students. We help parents understand this. We help students understand it too. Students are just as bad about the overscheduling as the parents.
Oh,
We
sure.
do a lot of sleep education, and when you're depressed and you're anxious, there's a correlation with sleep deprivation. And if you're so sleep deprived, it can actually trigger depressive episodes.
Ugh,
So
that's
yeah, kids are nowhere getting the sleep. I mean, our average in our survey is 6.7 hours.
for high school
6.7
kids.
hours for high school kids. They're supposed to be
Oh,
getting between 8 and 10
8 and
every
10.
single
Yeah.
night.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a great lead into my next question because you talked about the importance of PDF. I love that, right? Playtime, downtime, and family time. For educators and student life professionals in our audience, how do they advocate for that within this culture that, we're rewarding achievement and busyness?
Yeah. First of all, the busyness thing, when you ask that question, it's like people say, "How are you?" The first thing everyone says is busy. Oh my gosh, so
Busy.
busy. What a week. What a week,
I
right?
said
We're so
that to
busy.
you. I
Yeah,
just said
yeah,
that to you.
yeah. And I said it back, right? Kids hear this. Kids hear this. They see it, and teachers and school administrators and school deans and they're busy, and they all see it. And and someone would look at you crazy if you said, "I'm good. God, I've
Oh,
got
I'm
everything
good.
under control.
Relax. I'm put my
My
feet up.
inbox is empty. I've hit all my slacks," right? So, part of that is culture, and we have
Yeah,
to talk to the kids about that. Part of it
sure.
is they are not mini adults. They have developmental needs, right?
Right.
So PDF, it turns out, comes from a study on protective factors, many studies, not just one, on protective factors for teens. And it turns out if you let kids play, like really do what is fun and interesting to them, not because they have to do it, that's the P, the playtime. Obviously, we want them to be with their peers.
Right.
The D is downtime, which includes sleep, but also includes time to really just think about, like, what is it like to be a friend, and who am I, and what do I want to be? And then the F is the most important, and that's family time. And that is 5 times a week, 25 minutes duration. Family time is, it's approximately 5 times a week, 25 minutes duration. It could be at a meal, it could be a family walk. And what I tell, so one is to educate parents and guardians about that. But at schools, PDF is just as important. So we have people look at their schedules. Are kids running around like chickens with their head cut off every day? Can you get through the lunch line? Can everyone have some downtime? Can we build in time for meditation or yoga or breath work? I know some people are rolling their eyes when they hear this, but it turns out
They've got classes to do, Denise. They don't have time for breath work. They've got to learn.
Right. And so here's, if you look at the studies, it's actually pretty amazing, particularly before high stakes exams, et cetera. If you do some breathing with kids, if you get them to focus, they actually do better in their studies. And so what teachers will tell us is taking 10 minutes out of my class to do some meditation or to have kids learn positive coping strategies for dealing with stress, tenfold allows me to get more teaching in. So lots of good studies on that. But here's the other thing. I want you to think about playtime, downtime, and family time at school. How can you create little mini families? We have schools that do this with advisory, right?
Right.
Right. You have a small component and they're together for all 4 years with one adult who's really kind of their main go-to person. We have schools that actually put kids together in a family. So you take a first grader, a second grader, third grader, fourth grader, fifth grade, right? Boom, you're a family.
Yeah, I like that.
And we plan activities that they do together so that you're learning how to get along with kids of all different ages. And you have someone who can ask a question to, wait, I'm kind of scared about 6th grade. What should I do?
What's it like?
Exactly. And then you want to look at where are we actually supporting playtime at school? Schools that open up their gyms during free periods or before school or after school, where you're modeling how to solve those problems. A lot of social and emotional issues happen during recess or on playgrounds, right? Or when kids are trying out for things and they don't get it, right? You have to really be modeling how we do play the right way. So we help schools think about PDF all the time. And then we really help kids and parents figure out every day, when is your PDF? When is your playtime? When's your downtime? When's your family time?
Yeah, I love that. And so are you talking with faculty at schools about that, thinking about that for themselves? Because we talk about, we got to take care of the students and we got to educate the parents on this. But, we're talking about how, burnout is high for teachers. Everyone's feeling pretty stretched and stressed. And, there's some things, people are talking about mindfulness a little bit and, you've got to take care of or see what teachers need so that they stay. But are we really doing or saying the things so that the adults that the kids see every day are actually modeling this? Because if we're telling them, no, you go have playtime and downtime and family time, I'm just going to go over here and keep working.
Right. No, they look to us, right? So there's a great book called Anxious Parents, Anxious Students. Gosh, I don't know. We have to look that up.
Fair enough.
Lynn Lyons.
Okay.
But in other words, they see us and they take that energy from us, and it causes them stress and anxiety when they see us stressed and anxious. So we have, in addition to our student surveys, we have a faculty and staff survey. And we're asking questions on that, like how stressed do you think your kids are? How much sleep do you think your students are getting? But we're also saying, how much sleep are you getting? How stressed are you? do you have an adult at the school that you can go to if you had an issue? We're asking those same questions and flipping it around and saying that to the faculty and staff.
Great.
And then we do these workshops where we say, okay, wait a minute, the gym is open for kids. Are we
Why
allowed
don't
to
you
go work
go?
out at the gym after school, right? Like, what are some low-hanging fruits? Someone
Yeah.
will say, well, before COVID, we used to all get together Friday afternoon for a nice little happy hour or whatever it is. We don't do that anymore. Can we bring that back? People were rushing off because they have to pick up kids or whatever. What would make sense to build community amongst the adults so that we are modeling community building activities for
Absolutely.
the kids? So that's one of our most popular workshops and surveys, really, is the faculty and staff well-being.
That's great. And so let's talk about Challenge Success a little bit. So that started as your lab at Stanford and grew into a full nonprofit. Walk us through how that model works and what a school actually does when they partner with you guys.
Sure. Well, there's the nice thing is there's lots of different ways to be a part of the Challenge Success family. That's what we call it. We're like, once you join, you're part of our family.
Love
So
it.
some schools just like to take our surveys. So we have surveys for parents and guardians, surveys for students, surveys for faculty and staff. And we don't just give you back some spreadsheet with the data. We actually
Right.
walk you through the data. And what's really nice is we ask the school to use it with their faculty, with their staff, with their students as an academic exercise to really say, what are we noticing here? What a great
Mhm.
thing for students to get involved in. One of our
Sure.
main centerpieces at Challenge Success is centering student voice. So we do that through the surveys, but we also do it through lots of qualitative data. We have adults shadow students throughout the day. We do I wish campaigns. I wish my
Hmm.
teachers knew. I wish my parents knew. I wish
Love
my
that.
buddies knew, right? We do, we have a whole bunch of listening in exercises. So we gather all this data, qualitative and quantitative, and then we have you look at it and we help you look at it and we say, okay, what is something we want to tackle? It looks like kids aren't sleeping. Do we want to do a sleep campaign? Do we need to change the schedule because they're literally running around too much and they don't have time to reflect? And reflection is so key to
Right.
learning. So we have what's called the SPACE framework,
Okay.
SPACE. And so
Mhm.
if you work with us, you're probably working in one of those categories as a school based on the data that we've helped you collect. You might be thinking about the schedule and the student's use of time. That's the S. Or
Mhm.
homework load. We do a lot of work with homework
Yeah,
load.
homework
You
load.
might be thinking about pedagogy that engages, right? How do we encourage more voice and choice? How do we understand that rigor does not equal load? That's a
How about
really key
that?
point.
That
Really
is
key
a
point,
huge point.
right? And often really mistaken. So that's the P, pedagogy that engages. A is alternative and authentic assessment, right? We are so test and quiz happy in the school world. That is just not how we show mastery. It causes more stress.
Yep.
Kids will say this emptied out of my brain. The minute I took it, I just spit it out,
It's
emptied out of my
gone.
brain.
Done.
Half the kids don't do well. We still move on to the next unit. What's going
Yep.
on there, right? So we help them think about different ways to do assessment in ways that make sense, mastery, standards-based grading, portfolios, all of
Mhm.
that.
Okay.
The C in SPACE is probably the most important for your listeners, which is the climate of care. And that is really making kids feel like they letting them know we value you, we honor your opinions, your voices, we want you to be your true authentic selves. In a
Mhm.
world that is so nasty right now, that is really hard to get that message across, particularly for
Right.
certain kinds of kids who are really struggling. And that is where I think a student dean, a student activity director, this is where students feel like they do belong often, is
Mhm.
in the robotics club or in,
Yeah.
in advisory or with that one dean who they know is kind of working
Yeah.
to be their person. So that's the climate of care. What we also do in part of that climate of care is teach positive coping strategies for stress.
Mm.
We are all going to face stress. The number
Yes.
one stressor that kids say on our surveys is grades, tests, and assessments. That's above family issues. That's above social issues.
Yeah.
It's workload, grades, tests, and assessment, and where they're going to go to college for some of the older kids, right?
Well,
What or their
absolutely.
future. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're all going to face stress. How do we teach positive coping strategies at school? That goes back to the breath work. It goes back to like, are you going to go for a run? Are you getting enough exercise to clear your brain? Are you getting enough sleep? How are we going to do that? Schools kind of have to teach that. And I know it's a different role than some people might think they should do. And some people
Mhm.
might be worried about state laws and who knows what else going on around that. But we've
Right.
got to bring social emotional learning back into really our curriculum.
Right.
And then the E is kind of doing what I'm doing now, educating everyone about the developmental needs of kids and about the science of education. So many people are teaching and thinking about teaching in really, really old ways because it's the one profession that we all think we know because we've seen it and been in it for
Right.
12 to 16 years.
Exactly.
And they don't realize, like, we put people in MRI machines and watch them do math problems. Like, we should not be teaching the same way as, happened a million years ago. And you would
Yeah.
never go to your cardiologist and say, hey, let's go back to leeches because this new stuff
I'm not
does
with
not
this
sound
new stuff.
good,
Yeah.
right? And yet we know, and you could see that with the teaching of reading, with the teaching of math, with how we look at grades and tests
Yeah.
and pedagogy. We
Mhm.
really don't want to see schools looking the same as they were when the parents of our children and our students went there. They should
Absolutely.
look different.
They should look different for sure. And so, if a school or student life office could only focus on one area first, which I'm sure if they should do that, but where do you typically point them and why?
Well, I think, and I realize that a lot of your listeners are not in the classroom every single day. They're working on very important roles on outside. Some are in the classroom as well. I would say the climate of care is probably the most important one. If you're having attendance issues, if you're having school avoidance, if you're having bullying, if you're having real discipline issues, if you're seeing microaggressions and racism, like, this is the category that you absolutely need to focus on because no learning is going to happen until they feel like they
Until
belong and
they
they want to be there
belong.
and you have their back.
Right.
So it's really huge. And I think you'd be surprised. I mean, I'm surprised at some of these schools that are kind of small and private and loving. I would
Mhm.
think these numbers would be so high, and for whatever reason they're not. And you've got to then go to the kids and kind of swallow your pride a little bit and say, wait, what's going on? Let's
Yeah,
do
what's
a
happening
focus
here?
group. Why
Yeah.
why do you feel like you don't belong? We're doing everything. And it's sometimes it's things like, well, we can never see our friends because we're in completely different classes. So even though you say you don't track, it's kind of pseudo tracking. And then lunch is 20 minutes, right? So sometimes it's
Yeah.
something like that. Other times it's like, hey, you don't know this, but on the water polo team, I'm the only student of color, and I'm feeling bullied.
And that's hard.
And there's a bunch of stuff going down, and the coach isn't aware, and I'm afraid to tell the coach because I want to get played, and so there's stuff deep down that you may not realize is happening, and that's really in that climate of care bucket in the space category.
Yeah, it's so important that students feel like they belong on campus. Top priority.
Yeah,
for sure.
And parents and guardians too, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're only sending messages out in one language, if you're only holding PTA meetings during the day, there's so many things. Look at your website. What messages are being sent to all different kinds of families by your website? And I'll tell you another one that happens all the time, and sometimes it is the student services folks that deal with this: award ceremonies. Let's just take one moment and talk about that. We had a student say, and his dad was actually the head of the school.
Oh.
And he said, this is a ceremony to make me feel like crap because all the smart kids are on the stage, or all the athletes are on the stage, or you look at who gets, their pictures put up all around, all the 4.0 students, or there's a school that names where the kids are going to college every year, and, celebrating all these people. And he said, and what about me? It's basically saying you don't belong here.
You don't matter.
You don't matter. You're a loser. So just even looking at what messages are we sending really innocently, not thinking, not maliciously, what messages are we sending about who belongs, who should be at our school, and who succeeds at our school? That's really why we're called Challenge Success, right? We're challenging that really narrow notion of success.
And what success looks like. I love that. That's great. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Learn something new.
There you go.
So want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about AI, because, we always have to talk about AI.
Yes,
and that's really completely disrupted the academic integrity conversation. How is Challenge Success thinking about this? Is it primarily a policy problem, a pedagogy problem, or do you think it's something deeper?
It's yes to all. So
all that,
we were in the right place at the right time. We have been surveying schools on academic integrity because it correlates, of course, with belonging and well-being and engagement, right? If you're stressed, It's 1 o'clock in the morning. You got something due tomorrow. You're not
Just
engaged.
gotta
You think it's busy
get her
work,
done.
whatever. Just right. So we collected data kind of pre-post that November 22 when ChatGPT became
ChatGPT
sort of
first came out.
ubiquitous.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. Cheating before November 2022 was about 72% of the students said that they cheated in one stage or another. This is middle schools and high schools. It's higher at high schools.
Yeah.
They would copy from a paper with someone's knowledge, without someone's knowledge. They would stay home on the day of a test to get answers. They would use an illegal technology or cheat sheet or whatever. So it was high long before AI came into view.
Right.
And what our study shows is AI did not unleash the Kraken of cheating. The Kraken was already released.
It was
right?
already unleashed.
But what it has done, and what we are tracking, we've continued to track since 2022, is more kids are using it in ways that they're not even sure is appropriate because the school policies are not clear, or different teachers have different policies and they just can't keep it straight.
Yeah.
Or a teacher will say, well, you can't use AI to write this, but you can, or you can't use AI to do this paper, but we want you to do research. Well,
You can
if I go
consult
into
on it,
Google,
right?
yeah, if I go into Google and Gemini pops up, does that mean I'm breaking the rule? Am I cheating? And they're really stressed about this,
Yeah.
right? And so what we say is you've got to have policies that are clear and transparent and consistent. But you also have to realize that AI is not going away. So just to ban it completely doesn't work.
Right.
And in order to do this, in order to come up with policies that really work, you have to bring students into the conversation.
Yes.
And that is really key. And the students will tell you why, if AI can do all this, what is the purpose of school? Like, if AI can write, why do we have to learn how to write? If AI can do that, right? And so there's a lot of, there's probably more use than adults think. You can't detect your way out of it. These detectors, I know schools are spending so much money on these AI detection. Do not do it. Save your money. AI is getting better every day at like a really fast pace. These don't believe these detection, high profile, high money kind of systems. No. The best way is to really bring the students into the conversation and talk about how to make school meaningful and purposeful for these kids. So for me, I see the freaking out about AI as freaking out about the wrong thing. They're freaking about cheating. They should have been freaking out about cheating 20 years ago. It's just more blatant and obvious now, right? But I see it as a Trojan horse. I see it as a way to get more people to think about, whoa, what is the purpose of school? What do kids need to know in a world where AI is going to be doing a lot of this? And if we aren't bringing it into the school, which kids are we disadvantaging by not teaching them this? Because I talk to CEOs and CTOs all the time in Silicon Valley and across the globe, and they'll say, don't send me someone who isn't really proficient in using AI.
Right. Yeah. And so there's that line between wanting to kind of be prepared for kind of the future and kind of where that real learning happens. And so there's a tension there, really. And so how do we manage that piece? Because I think that's really important to talk about.
Yeah. Well, so our most popular workshop right now at Challenge Success is our professional development workshop on using AI for engaged learning. And we do the same one for parents, parenting in an AI world. And what we do is we think about when are the times where it's helpful for learning, when are the times that it's harmful for learning. And we do case studies and we have people up on their feet and talking about this, and we bring students in and to make sure that the students agree with when the teacher thinks it's helpful or harmful, right? And to kind of have the adults hear that pushback. And then how the key question is what we used to use as evidence of student thinking was student output.
Right.
And now AI can do most of that student output. So it actually changes and flips Bloom's taxonomy around a little bit. And so now you want everyone, students, teachers, parents, coaches, deans, everyone talking about what is appropriate evidence of student thinking? How do we keep that friction, that really purposeful friction in without outsourcing thinking to the AI? And those are school-wide conversations, department-level conversations, classroom conversations with students to really have us all on the same page about what do we need to learn in a world of AI.
Nice. And so you talked about parents and doing workshops as part of your work. What do you think parents fundamentally misunderstand about what helps their kids thrive and what shifts when they start to get it?
Yeah. So very well-meaning parents will say the first thing their kid walks in the door, they'll say, "Hey, how'd you do on the history test?"
Yep.
Let's just take that question, right? So what you're saying is that that's the most important thing that you care about that happened to your kid that whole day. And if you really push a parent, it can't possibly be. You want to make sure they're happy. You
Right.
want to make sure they have a friend. You want to make sure they're doing good. They're asking good questions. They're curious. They're creative. They're excited about learning. Ask about anything besides the darn grade on the history test. Because
Exactly,
the
the
reason
grade.
these kids are cheating is we're telling them we care about your grades. We post your GPA and your transcript on the refrigerator. We tell people where you're going to go to college, right? We
Mm-hmm.
announce it and make it a stressful thing for you about what your SAT and ACT scores are. So we have to
Yeah.
really change our messaging as parents. And I'm not saying you shouldn't ask about school. We want parents to be curious and interested in their kids' education. We don't want them to just, not be,
Right.
right? We have some parents who never show up to student teacher conferences and stuff. No, we want you
No, yes.
to be an involved parent. And how involved is too involved? Are you checking the LMS? Are you checking the grades multiple times a day, a week, right? At some point, your kid is supposed to be doing this. Your job as a parent is to scaffold that kid with a little bit of guardrails, a little bit of coaching, and by the time they're ready to go off to whatever they're doing after high school, you're not going with them.
Right.
So, are you grading the homework? Are you correcting the homework? Are you sitting next to them while they're doing the homework? Are you helicoptering and plowing, snow plowing and helicoptering the way, right? We need kids
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make good decisions on their own. And so we have to model that. We have to prepare them for that. We have to use guardrails for that. But at
Mm-hmm.
some point, they've got to do the
They've got
work.
to do it. They've got to be able to do
Right.
it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Who's keeping the schedule? I have this little thing that we do. We have a healthy college admissions workshop that we do at Challenge Success. And we talk about
Mm-hmm.
sort of finding the right fit and how that's way more important than where you go. We spent a ton of time writing this paper written at an 8th grade level
Oh, wow.
called A Fit Over Rankings,
Mm.
because people are having a fit over college rankings, but
Yes.
also we need to find the right fit. So read the paper, but in our workshop, when we talk about a healthy approach to college admissions, I show this grid. And on one side is academic skills, and then social emotional learning skills. And then we have sort of study skills, and then life skills. And I
Mm-hmm.
say, we're spending all this time hiring tutors for math and chemistry. I want us to hire a tutor for how to balance
Doing
a
life
budget.
skills.
Yeah, how to balance a budget, how to set your own doctor's appointments, how to make sure you're taking your own medications on time, right? How to communicate kindly with others, how to hire a tutor for how to cope with stress in a positive way, right? Hire a tutor for anything besides math at this
Yeah,
point, because we're
absolutely.
not focused on the right things.
We aren't. And it's so funny you say that because I used to teach a class called Senior Transitions. And one of the things we would have kids do is write a letter to themselves that they would get at their 5-year reunion. Kids didn't know how to address an envelope.
No, I know.
I
Well,
was
now they're going to roll their
floored.
eyes, Bridget, and say, well, you don't have to do that in an
Right, you don't
envelope
have to do
either.
that anymore, right? I can just
But no,
send an
just
email to
basic-
myself, right?
If the students can't fill out their own college applications, they're probably not ready to go to college.
Right. So does that message for parents land differently depending on the school community? Like how's that message been received?
It does. And I will say this. We change our workshops around depending on who we're talking to,
Okay.
because there are some parents. So for the majority of parents out there, the research will say it truly doesn't matter where your kid goes to college, community college, University of California, whatever, fill in the blank.
Yep. Fill in the
Does not
blank.
matter, because what matters is finding the right fit. It matters how they go to school, not where they go to school. It matters that they're curious, engaged, that they have a relationship with a professor that is positive, that they find ways to do some long-term studies, et cetera. All this stuff, right? That's in the paper.
Right.
For a very small percentage of kids, it actually does matter where you go to college. And that is if you are the first in your family to go to college. You want to go to a place that maybe you'll graduate without debt, or maybe
Yes.
we'll have a safety net for you if you really aren't
Yes.
sure how to do that right. If you are a kid who has some learning differences, it might make a difference that you go to a place that has a support system and understands and gives you the extra time you need and all of that. So I don't want to be flippant and say,
No, sure.
hey, it doesn't matter for anybody. But what does matter is the right fit.
Mhm.
And part of that finding the fit is if you are like a first gen to go to college and you want to graduate without debt, you got to find the right fit college that's going to help you do that.
Yes.
And there's 4,000.
So many.
4,000
So many.
universities. You want to go to a top 10% university in the world? That's 400. You can't
400.
name 400. They can't name
Exactly.
it. They can't even name it.
Exactly. That's I love that. That's great. So, if a student life professional is listening right now and wants to bring more of this thinking to their school campus, to their community, what's one thing that they could start doing this week? Some low-hanging fruit.
Well, first of all, go to our website because we have a ton of free resources on there and you can explore low-hanging fruit depending on what topic you want to cover. Do you want to do parent education? Do you want to look up that college research brief that I'm talking about? We have a research brief on coping. We have a homework toolkit. We have, so I would say, number one, go to the website, which is challengesuccess.org. Set up a meeting with one of us. We're happy to talk through, give us a sense of what is your problem. We really individualize our attention school by school, district by district. So
I love it.
we're not cookie cutter. Every school is different. Every school has a different set of problems. We are happy to really differentiate our advice and our interventions. And we will not do it. Some schools get very frustrated with that, by the way, Bridget. They're like, just tell us what to do.
Tell us what to do. All right, like, give me the blueprint. Yeah,
there's
give me
no
the playbook.
Perfect schedule. Like I can tell you lots of things that we look for in a good, healthy schedule, but there's not the perfect schedule because how big is your campus? How long does it take you to get from point A to point B? Right?
Exactly.
How does everyone eat lunch at the same time? Right. So I would say go to our website, check out. We have so many free resources, and know that even one person can make a difference at a school. So even if you think, gosh, my head of school is never going to be on board, or my division head's never going to be on board, you can still look up our resources and do one thing. In fact, we actually had a little campaign where it was called the One Thing campaign. What is one thing everyone at the school is doing to improve student well-being, engagement, or belonging? Whether that's telling kids, hey, when you go home tonight, don't put your cell phone next to your pillow. Right? Here's the importance of sleep. And here's what putting that cell phone next to your pillow does. Let's go out. I had one school where they bought every 8th grader a little $2 alarm clock from Target. This was a small school, so that they would not have their phones in their bedroom at night, because they were seeing absolutely exhausted kids and kids with mental health issues, and sleep and mental health absolutely correlate.
Absolutely. You can't escape. That's this generation can't escape. Like, they are always inundated, always on their phone. There's never a time where they're just kind of not around technology. And we need to kind of think about that a little bit more.
Yeah. Think about what it's doing to their brains.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and we're just finding out some of that data. We help schools think about cell phone usage, AI usage, how to get teachers to do more engaging, hands-on experiential lessons.
Yeah.
How are we going to change our grading policies? I mean, we will really hone in on what you think you need most based on helping you collect lots of data to make that decision.
Awesome. So as we think about closing today, you taught at Stanford, you raised 3 kids, you worked in high schools and consulted with schools across the country, and I would imagine the world. What's something your own children have taught you about this work that no research study could?
Well, my kids used to say, if you hadn't written that stupid book, right? Because I would say things like they would have a test the next day and they wanted to stay up late and study. And I'd say, you got to go to bed. And they'd be like, any other parent would be like, stay up and study. And you wrote this book and now we have to go to bed. And I'll be like, yeah, but I know that if you sleep better, you're going to do better on the exam. And that's not how we actually cement our learning. We actually cement our learning 2 to 3 days before an exam with breaking down and looking at the studying in pieces. So yeah, they were, the sleep thing, I was really, really crazy with sleep. And I was really, really crazy in defending not being overloaded. So I had one kid at one point wanted to both do a sport and be the lead in the play. And my husband thought I was crazy, but I made them sign a contract saying I will still get 8 hours of sleep except for tech week. and except for the weeks that I have these big tournaments. And if I'm going to be grouchy to the rest of the family, mom and dad reserve the right to pull me from that practice, and I'll have to tell my coach, or I'll have to tell the theater director, because sleep is just so important, and overscheduling is real. And so we were very, very careful not to let our kids sign up for everything known to man. And it's because it's a buffet, Bridget. And we overeat at the buffet. It's a smorgasbord. We all overeat at the buffet. There's things I want to do too. I don't have time to do it. So what is the right, that's why we call our biggest workshop the well-balanced student. What's the right balance to find for every kid? You can't do it all. You have to sleep. You have to have playtime, downtime, family time. And my kids pushed against that, and it's hard. It's hard to really enforce it as a parent, but we did.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so, Denise, thank you so much for being here today. This conversation about what it actually means for students to thrive, and what educators and parents can do to make that possible, exactly what people need at the table to be thinking about. And so I'm so grateful you brought your research and your experience and your heart to this conversation.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. And so if you want to learn more about Denise's work, visit Challenge Success, not College Success, Challenge Success at challengesuccess.org, and pick up a copy of Doing School or Overloaded and Unprepared. Both are incredible starting points, and we'll include links in our show notes. And if you're not already following us on Instagram and TikTok, come find us. Search for Dean's Roundtable on both platforms for leadership insights, community building resources, and conversations that matter to student life professionals. We'd love to see you there. If you're enjoying the table, please subscribe, share it with a friend, and leave us a comment. It really helps more people find us. Thanks for pulling up a chair at the table today. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about, or maybe even something to try in your own community. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time on the table. Have a good one. All right.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Table Podcast Series. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We're seeking founding partner schools to be the first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Denise Poe, produced and edited by Andrew Sigmund, and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.